Good morning, everybody. My name is Chip Crowley, and this is my final leadership project presentation. So we'll go ahead and get right into it here. So to summarize my project, shortly I'll be giving up my Navy Greens back for Coast Guard Navy Blue. I'm going to be finishing up this deployment here in the next month or so. Heading back to a position in Boston where I'll be overseeing the transition up there from the older legacy patrol boats to the new Sentinel class 154-foot fast response cutters. So Boston's scheduled to receive 6 of them in the next year and a half. I'm going to be serving as the commissioning committee chair for the Coast Guard Cutter Chadwick. They're the first of the 6 coming over. And by serving in this position for the first one, I'm hoping to develop a better understanding of how the process works so I can help the next project officers for the next 5. These cutters are kind of the new shiny toy for the Coast Guard. They're very capable. Offer a lot of new capabilities in the New England region. So it's shaping up to be a fairly heavy national media event. We're already in touch with some local media, some national media. Looking like we're going to have one of the senators, Senator Ed Markey, overseeing the ceremony alongside with Coast Guard leadership. So it's going to be a fairly high stakes ceremony, lots of visibility on it, and I'm going to be working with a lot of local partners alongside with some folks here in the Coast Guard. So shaping up to be a pretty exciting project. So when thinking about my SMART goal, I was having a tough time with quantifying what a successful ceremony would look like. So I ended up deciding to kind of change my lens, and instead I want to be able to provide a strong blueprint for the next 5 project officers of the next 5 fast response cutters coming up to Boston of what to expect with planning a commissioning ceremony. So to make it more quantifiable, I, within the next 2 months, wanted to create a Coast Guard District 1, which is the New England Central Command, fast response cutter commissioning ceremony instruction. And I'll be outlining how I did that in the next few slides. All right, so my first objective underneath my SMART goal was to confirm the commissioning timeline of the Coast Guard cutter William Chadwick. By nailing down specifically when the cutter would be arriving in Boston and being ready to be placed in a commission status, I'll be able to better confirm dates for the commissioning ceremony, chairman's reception, media interviews, and everything else that comes along with the commissioning ceremony. And with the Coast Guard having all of its fast response cutters currently being built in a commercial shipyard in Lockport, Louisiana, I thought it was very important to get down there and get eyes on the cutter and talk to some of the folks down there and kind of see how the whole process works. Luckily, my command here in Bahrain was very receptive. They let me go for a week in late August, right around when this class was commencing, and I was able to get down there to Lockport. Took a few pictures here, so you can see that top picture. It's a cutter on the blocks. That's not the William Chadwick itself. That's the next cutter after it that's being ready to be placed in the water. But was able to see that. I was able to talk with some of the engineers down there. That guy in the yellow shirt in the second picture was the head engineer in charge of the construction of the fast response cutters. And they were able to give me a much better picture of when specifically the cutter would be ready for pickup and for crew training and familiarization and everything like that. It was also just great with hurricanes rolling through the south right now. I was able to talk with them, and I kind of opened up a line of communication. So if there's any delays in the project, I've got that kind of networking done, which is great. The last picture down there is the picture of Coast Guard Base Boston. That's the second big kind of muscle movement being done right now. Is with these brand new boats coming up, they need to completely refigure the piers there. It's about a 1.5 year long project, and it's going to be ongoing while the first couple of them arrive. So that's the groundbreaking ceremony there. You can see some senior Coast Guard officials alongside with Governor Baker of Massachusetts. Wasn't able to make it up to Boston. That's definitely on my list for when I get back into the States here in the next couple months. But trying to kind of piece together when the cutter specifically will be getting into Boston, and then also when the base and the piers will be ready to receive the ship. So that was something that was definitely one of my high priorities when I was starting this project. So my second objective was to understand the commissioning committee and which roles its members play in the commissioning process. There's 4 members here pictured. They're the other 4 members on my committee. The member on the top left is Mr. Skip Bowen. He is in charge of the FRC fast response cutter transition process throughout the Coast Guard. So he's taken place in all 49 ceremonies that have happened prior to the one that I'm planning. So he's got a wealth of knowledge. I was lucky enough to meet him down in Louisiana when I was down there, and I'm really looking forward to leading on him heavily throughout this process. The member on the top right is Lieutenant Commander Tyler Kelly. He's the prospective commanding officer of the Coast Guard Cutter Chadwick. Lucky to have served with him in the past. He and I have a great relationship, and he's going to be keeping me in the loop with the cutter, the crew, and the status of when they'll be getting into Boston specifically. On the bottom left is Susan Curtin. She's the president of the Coast Guard Foundation, and they spearhead the funding of these commissioning ceremonies. Similar to Mr. Bowen, she's taken place in over 35 of these ceremonies, so she's got a wealth of knowledge for how these processes typically go. And lastly, on the bottom right is Taylor St. Germain. She is the legislative aide to Senator Ed Markey here in Massachusetts. She's going to be helping me with providing me who's going to be specifically attending from the Massachusetts legislature, and also with the coordination of media for the event. So haven't met her in person yet. Looking forward to doing that when I get into Boston in the next month or so. So after getting down to Lockport, Louisiana, I was able to talk to some of the folks down there and confirm that the Coast Guard Cutter Chadwick will be arriving into Boston sometime in the mid-January timeframe, which would set us up for late January to early February commissioning ceremony. After that, I wanted to make sure that I got to know my team a little bit better, and my first instinct was to try to use a common application. I'll talk a little bit about that more in my major challenges slide, but I set up a bi-weekly commissioning committee team call where we all got together. I would get up in the middle of the night because it was kind of just working like that with the time difference. And we would go through some kind of major muscle movements that we were all working on. Typically, these ceremonies ramp up around the 3-month mark, so we're still pretty far out. So these calls have been pretty informal and pretty light, but I anticipate them ramping up as we get closer and closer to the ceremony. Getting some honest feedback from my group in Module 5 was very helpful as well. They recommended for me to coordinate individual coordination calls, and that was with each member of the committee. And I incorporated those starting last week, and I think they've been going well so far. I met with each member of the committee individually. We just had a nice about 15-minute call each, and I was able to kind of better discern what specifically they were in charge of pertaining to the commissioning ceremony. And I think going forward, these will be useful in letting me get a little bit more detail into what's going on in each of the committee's committee members' bandwidth. So looking forward to utilizing these as the commissioning ceremony process ramps up. So after getting to know the members of my committee, I finally felt like I was in a strong enough position to draft the Fast Response Cutter Commission Ceremonies Guideline. This is certainly going to be a living document, but I at least wanted to get a finalized instruction signed by the Admiral in New England. So for the next project officers, they'll have a blueprint to go off of for the beginning of the planning of their ceremonies. I'll discuss more of the process and where it is now on the next slide, but I at least want to show you guys a picture of the first page here. So for the current status of the project, as discussed in the previous slide, I've drafted up my first revision of the Fast Response Cutter Commissioning Ceremony Instruction, and that is currently in the routing process at Coast Guard District 1, which is the New England Command. I am expecting fully to get a revision from them with a bunch of edits in the next couple weeks, but I'm hoping to have a finalized instruction signed by the Admiral there within the next month, so hopefully from some point in early to mid-November. I'm also going to be conducting a site visit to Boston in early November upon my return to the States. I'm really looking forward to that. I'm going to be meeting at the base there where the ceremony will be being held with a bunch of officials for progress on the pier reconfiguration, and with 2 members of my committee, with Taylor St. Germain, the legislative aide to Ed Markey. She's going to be kind of walking me through the media process, how that's going to work, and what to kind of expect throughout the ceremony, and also help me coordinate which legislative staff specifically is going to be there from Massachusetts, so I can help set that up with our Coast Guard leadership. I'm also going to be meeting with the Coast Guard Foundation president, Susan Curtin, who is also in my committee, and she's going to be walking me through the funding piece of this, and we're going to look at the budget for the ceremony and how the typical budget process works. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I think that that'll be kind of the kickstart to this entire process. So the 2 major challenges I encountered throughout this project were the time difference between myself and everyone else and the military-civilian gap. I'm 7 hours ahead of everybody here in Bahrain, which certainly posed some challenges with correspondence. Some things just kind of get lost in the shuffle. And also, just being in the military, sometimes I forget that I'm talking to people that have never gone through the brainwashing that I have. And it led to some kind of communications gaps. Luckily, I posed some of this to my group in Module 5, and they posed trying to find a common application. So I use Microsoft Teams, which has worked really well with kind of bridging a military and civilian application that we both use. It also led to me being able to schedule some times, which, like I said before, I had to get up early a couple nights, but it led to us being able to link up on video calls, at the same time and see each other face to face. So I definitely think that I was able to utilize Microsoft Teams to bridge both of these challenges. So for key learnings throughout this project, I would say my main one revolves around networking, and that's just to never be afraid to network. I think that being in the military, I never really had to network for the natures of my jobs, all being on ships, but this has shown me that almost intrusively networking has been very beneficial for me in going out of my way to meet some of these people in person and some of them virtually. By establishing face-to-face relationships with the members of my committee, I've been able to get a lot more done than I think I would have been at this point, not having met these people face-to-face and just going off of Microsoft Teams chat. I think that it's also opened up a line of communications that they know they can approach me with problems, and I think going forward, it's just kind of set the groundwork for a successful ceremony. So I hope to not shy away from networking in the future, wherever my endeavors take me. But this project has really opened my eyes to the power of it and how beneficial it can be to be proactive in getting to know people that are going to be helpful in accomplishing your goals. So thank you very much for your time today, and I look forward to reviewing some of your projects as well.